Hi everyone, thank you for allowing me to participate in this panel. If you're watching this video, then that means that I am currently in the hospital with my wife and my new baby, which is why I couldn't be here live in person, but I wanted to record this video so that I could talk to you all about these important developments that we're seeing for the 2021 proxy season and provide some strategies for issuers and how they can mitigate their impact. So by now, you've probably heard from Carl on the changing demographics of company ownership and the rise of the retail investor. So let's jump right into the recent changes that we've seen from Charles Schwab and TD Ameritrade and the erosion of the discretionary voting over the past 2 years and how it could impact issuers at the 2021 annual meeting and beyond. So last year, Charles Schwab stopped its practice of applying proportionate voting to routine ballot items at shareholder meetings, and the routine ballot item part is critical. This year, TD Ameritrade followed suit. So these two combined will have probably an important impact on the number of shares represented at shareholder meetings in the 2021 proxy season and beyond. So Charles Schwab and TD Ameritrade are two of the largest brokerage firms in the United States, and the shares custodied at TD and Schwab often represent some of the largest brokerage positions for many issuers, and therefore the loss of the discretionary voting from these brokers can be significant for issuers this year and going forward. So let's talk a bit, let's set the stage by talking about, what discretionary voting is and how it works. Some of you might be familiar with this, but for others, if you're not, I want to provide a brief overview of discretionary voting and how it works. So the New York Stock Exchange allows brokers to vote on certain items on behalf of their clients if the broker has not received voting instructions from those clients. So what this means is that brokers are permitted or may be permitted to vote on behalf of their clients only for routine ballot items. So some of the frequent routine ballot items that you see on annual meeting agendas are auditor ratification, reverse stock splits, and increases in authorized common shares. So for ballot items where brokers are permitted to vote the uninstructed or the unvoted shares on behalf of their clients, brokers can take one of three actions. They can participate in what we're going to call for this conversation like straight discretionary voting. They can utilize proportionate voting, or they can take no action, which means that they would not vote the uninstructed shares. There's nothing that requires them to vote the uninstructed shares, which is why you now see Charles Schwab and TD Ameritrade not taking any action on the uninstructed shares for routine ballot items at shareholder meetings. So brokers who have traditionally or historically voted uninstructed shares held by their clients have traditionally just voted them in line with the board's recommendations. So it's a routine ballot item. The brokers just say, you know what, we're going to vote these shares all in line with the board's recommendations. Now, the second way that broker discretionary voting kind of evolved was there was this utilization of proportionate voting, which is what TD Ameritrade used to do. So what they do is they vote the uninstructed shares in the same proportion to the shares that were, we'll call it, actively voted by the underlying holders at that brokerage. So quick example, if there was 1 million shares held at TD Ameritrade last year, 200,000 of those shares were actively voted, 100,000 shares voted for a proposal, 100,000 shares voted against the proposal, and then 800,000 shares didn't vote at all. The broker, TD Ameritrade, would then say, okay, we're going to take the 800,000 shares and vote them in the same proportion for and against as the shares that were actively voted. So that 800,000 would get split 50-50, and 400,000 shares would be voted discretionarily for a proposal, and another 400,000 would be voted against, so that all 1 million shares were present and accounted for at the meeting in a 50-50 split, 500,000 for, 500,000 against. All right, so that's proportionate voting. Now, the third thing that brokers can do, which is now what TD Ameritrade and Charles Schwab are doing, is do nothing. Take no action on uninstructed shares. So what does this mean for issuers when they're going to hold their shareholder meeting? It is mid-April, so there's some shareholder meetings that are going on and a lot that are about to go on in the next couple of months. So what does it mean? Well, it means that unvoted shares held through Charles Schwab and TD Ameritrade will not be present at that meeting. So you will likely see a drop in quorum and may have an issue passing certain proposals. So let's talk about this. This is going to be the most crucial for issuers that have high retail ownership, that rely on the broker discretionary vote and proportionate voting to achieve quorum, to hold the meeting, and also to pass certain key proposals. A lot of times these issuers are smaller cap companies, or they're from a specific sector or industry that attracts a lot of like individual investors. But ultimately, this change will be felt by almost every company, regardless of sector or market cap. As I said, the decline is probably going to be the most concerning for issuers that either relied on the discretionary vote historically to achieve quorum, or if they have a majority of outstanding vote requirement for a routine ballot item, i.e. a reverse stock split or an increase in authorized on the ballot this year. So that's the issue. What can people do about it? Well, it means that you need to take a look at where your shares are custodied and what percentage of your shares are held through the retail community versus institutional investors. You should also look at, of the retail shares, where are the shares held through brokers that utilize discretionary voting, proportionate voting, or take no action on the uninstructed shares. That analysis can kind of help drive your decision making going forward and can help you determine if you have to take some of the necessary steps that I'm going to go through and outline now. And these steps are also included in the PowerPoint presentation that will be part of the handouts after this presentation, so you can refer back to it. So the issue is ultimately that there's an erosion of broker discretionary voting that's going on at annual meetings. So now what we need to do is we've got to figure out strategies to offset this and to maximize support for issuers at their upcoming meetings. So how are you going to do this? Well, the first thing that I think you're going to do, one of the first preliminary steps, is you're going to order Nobo lists from Broadridge and possibly from Mediant, depending on the way your shares are broken out. The next thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to contact your insiders and any large holders to let them know that the meeting is coming up and that you're going to need their vote in order to get some of these proposals passed or to reach a necessary quorum. The last thing that you're going to do is you're going to consider employing a multi-pronged retail outreach approach. And you're going to want to consider doing a targeted call campaign so that you can directly solicit and capture votes from individual or retail holders over the phone. You also might want to consider doing reminder mailings to key unvoted accounts based on the early voting returns. You also then might want to follow up with some additional solicitation tools, maybe more reminder mailings, maybe some emails, maybe an increased volume of calls going out to your retail holders, maybe adjust the range of your retail holders that you're contacting. Maybe you want to start with, for example, anybody who holds 5,000 shares or more. Maybe you decide to drop that down to 2,000 shares or more, depending on how the voting is going. You're also going to want to engage with your institutional and your retail investors so that they are aware that these, that the meeting is going on and that these key proposals are on the ballot so that you can secure their support. You can help them understand how these proposals tie into the overall goal of the company and why it's so important for these proposals to pass. Next thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to actively monitor the voting throughout the solicitation from the outset of voting so that you can see the early voting returns from the discretionary vote and from some of those insiders who hopefully vote early. And that'll help you gauge how many shares you need to still solicit and to capture and to secure in order to meet quorum or to achieve some of these key proposal vote requirements. So those are some solicitation strategies you might want to employ. Ultimately, the theme here is you need to understand who your shareholders are, where the shares are being held, and then if from that, do an analysis on if you could potentially have a gap in the number of shares you need to either achieve your quorum or get a necessary proposal passed. And if that's the case, then you're going to want to put on the full court press and go with a pretty robust retail engagement effort in order to secure the necessary support to hold the meeting and get these proposals passed. I'm happy to answer any questions any of you all might have on this. I tried to jam a bunch in. I tried to anticipate some of the questions that you all might have, but I'm sure there are things that I may have missed. I believe Tom Ball from my team is available for questions afterwards. Tom authored a great piece on this issue, so he's an awesome resource. Please shoot him any questions during this panel. If you want to connect with me offline after this panel, please feel free to reach out. I may have just had a kid, but it's still proxy season, so I will be available going forward. Thanks to everybody for letting me participate in this panel. Appreciate everybody's time.